Welcome to Women's Sports Weekly, where women's sports happens every day, but we talk about it once a week. I'm Danielle.
And I'm Carolyn. Women's Sports Weekly is a podcast where we discuss the latest news, explore interesting stories, and share our love for women's sports. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Follow us and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We are back. We missed you all, but can't wait to share about our trip to Kenya.
Yes. First time in Africa, and it was amazing.
We took a trip to Kenya. It lasted 15 days, and we flew into Nairobi, which is the main city in Kenya, but then flew straight to Western Kenya to a smaller city called Kisumu. And then we went to Masai Mara, which is the area that you can go on safari. And then we made our way back to Nairobi. But we wanted to share with you all what we've been up to these past couple weeks and really hope that you've enjoyed the interviews.
And when you say Kisumu, yes, but we stayed in villages outside of Kisumu, which was pretty cool, in very rural part of Kenya, and got to do some work for nonprofits and learn about the village life and learn about different tribes. It's definitely an educational trip.
Yes, for sure. The culture, the community. So let's dive into the nonprofits just a bit. Our friend Meg has a nonprofit in Kenya. It's called Haki Health, Haki Health. And what she does is she is a pediatric oncologist nurse and traveled to Kenya and found that pediatric cancer, especially a certain kind called Burkitt's lymphoma, was particularly high in Western Kenya. To give a little bit of perspective, Burkitt's lymphoma in the United States has an over 90% survival rate, and in Kenya their survival rate drops to 52%, and most of that is due to lack of screening. Mm-hmm. So she was seeing kids who could definitely survive cancer but weren't because they found out that they had cancer a little bit too late. So she created this nonprofit, and Meg is our best friend. And we did not know exactly what she was doing and the impact she had until we were in Kenya and able to witness it. It was truly amazing.
Yes. And obviously she's told us about her trips to Kenya. She's been going since 2018. She has built such a community out there. One, getting to meet all the people she's become friends with over the years and all the people she's been working with at the hospital, learning more about the cancer that she's trying to help treat and what she's been doing. It's really incredible. Just have so much more compassion for the people living in Kenya and can truly understand why Meg is so passionate about it and why she even started this nonprofit to begin with.
And I think it can be hard, especially for us in the US. There's so many things that you can donate to. There's so many ways you can be involved in something. And Africa is far away, and it feels really far away. I was amazed, and I know Meg is an amazing person, but I was amazed by the impact of what she has been doing. Yep. So not only is she helping those with pediatric cancer, she's also helping this entire hospital that's running in Western Kenya, this village that uses the hospital. We can ask ourselves, where should we donate? Where should we spend our time? And I really think people should donate and spend their time to places that are meaningful to them. And the work that she is doing there and the little amount of money that can go such a long way. For me, that was the turning point. I was like, wow, $5 here in Kenya, especially in the villages where we were staying, can go so much farther than donating $5 to any nonprofit in the US. It's it's crazy that that's the way it is. $5 in Kenya covers an entire family's health insurance for an entire month, an entire family. It was something that I really appreciated being part of, and I'm glad that she was able to show us that.
Yeah. How I look at it, one coffee from a coffee shop, that $5, if you could donate, exactly what you said, could be helping out a family with health insurance for a month. It's just incredible to be able to see the impact with our own eyes and now have a better understanding. We want to help promote it as much as we can now because we understand and have met the wonderful people there and have a better understanding of kind of what they're going through and what help is needed, and to be able to have an impact here and there is great. We understand that it's hard to get a full picture without going there, and obviously not everyone has the means to travel halfway across the world to Kenya, but I do recommend looking into Haki Health at least and getting a better understanding of what the organization stands for and how you could help if you're interested.
The other thing that I just want to point out is that it's not Meg or Haki Health going in and telling the hospital, telling the community what's best for them. time. The community, the hospital know exactly what's best for them, and they just are lacking the resources in order to make it happen. So Meg is by no means telling them what they should be doing. She is just providing them with additional resources so that they can do their job better. And to me, that's an organization that I want to put my money into. Be one that is community led, one that is led by the people who are running the hospital, who are on the ground, the doctors and nurses there, and we just provide the financial resources to make it a little bit better. The people that we met in Kenya were amazing. I just kept thinking, wow, especially when we were in the villages, these people do not have much. They don't have running water. They don't have electricity. And yet their lives are so vibrant. They were so giving to us, so welcoming to us. It was such an amazing experience to be part of.
And it speaks volumes to Meg as well, because she surrounds herself with incredible people always. She's always introducing us to new people in the US. We understood she had a group out in Kenya in different parts and that she had made these connections, but to see them with our own eyes and to meet and feel the warmth of these people that Meg has befriended over the years, it was just amazing and so fun. I just really, really loved that aspect of the trip. The people really made it what it was.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. It's hard for us to promote our podcast. I think it's really hard for her to promote her nonprofit, even though it's not money going to her. It's not money going to her traveling out there. She's paying for all of that herself. We paid our way out to be there to help her in the ways that we could. And I think it can be difficult to promote yourself, but this is such a good, it opened my eyes to how great this organization and this idea is and how far American money can go in Kenya.
Yes, for sure. So shout out to Meg and Hockey Health. And the other organization we helped out with and volunteered with while we were out there is the PAD Project. And the PAD Project helps supply reusable pads to young girls in the schools. We also went into the schools to teach them not only how to use the pads, but about their period, about their menstrual cycle, what to expect. We were talking to like 4th through 8th graders, depending on the school. That is another great organization to be able to supply those products to people who need it. In the cities, it's a much different lifestyle. They have the means for the most part, not all, but it's definitely a lot different. But in the villages, they don't have those means. And the teachers were so welcoming to us, and just to be able to help out with that organization as well was great.
Yeah. And these students are speaking 3 languages. We were just blown away.
Yeah.
These are students in small villages in Kenya. They're speaking 3 languages, Kiswahili, which is the language that is primarily used in Kenya, their tribal language. So there's like over 40 tribes within Kenya. Then people are really passionate about which tribe they're associated with, and they have their tribal language that they know. And then they all know English.
Yeah.
And they speak it perfectly. And we're sitting over here like dum-dums trying to pick up a few words in Kiswahili to be able to better communicate.
And I think I can absolutely say I learned a lot more on that trip and a lot more on those school visits than I could have provided to those students. So
for sure.
Honestly, just thankful I was able to experience that and learn from these teachers and these students and everyone in the community. It was just really eye-opening and awesome.
It was great. The other thing we did was we ate and drank a lot. So what was some of your favorite food in Kenya?
So as Carolyn mentioned, as you just mentioned, the language, Kiswahili, which Meg was teaching us along the way. I am terrible at languages. I took French growing up, and then I tried Spanish for a year in high school and got a D. So it was like, okay, I'm going back to French. So now I'm thrown into Africa, needing to learn Kiswahili. Can't say it's my strong suit once again. But it took me about 2 weeks to get down my favorite meal there, which is chapati and dengu. And it's this lentil dish. They make food so well, and all the veggies and fruits are like, you could just see it all over the villages. People have plots of land and they just grow their own veggies. And that's like a lentil dish. They use a lot of tomatoes, onions, garlic in all their dishes. And honestly, I had no expectations for the food going into it because I've never really had African food before. So I really just did not know what to expect. I was blown away with how good these dishes were. Really, really enjoyed it. So that's my favorite dish.
You also love the ugali, which is a classic Kenyan dish. It's made out of corn, and it's created because it's really nutrient dense. And so you can have a little bit of it and you can be full for a while. For people who have a food scarcity, it's a great option and a great thing to eat. And it's like a staple among Kenyan men. They have every meal with their ugali. And then towards the end of the trip, it was like like Danielle also needed to have her meals with ugali.
It was very good. Very good. Not really good for you, I learned. So I was like, damn, good thing I don't have this in the US because I probably would be right there with them eating it in every meal. What was your favorite food?
My favorite food was also the chapati and dangu, the lentils. I also like the samaki, which is fish.
Yep.
And it's fish on the bone. It has its eyes still on, and it's not something I would usually eat here in the US, but to be there and to have it. We had coconut samaki one night. It was so, so good. It was also just amazing to be away for 2 weeks, away from work, have time together. We celebrated our 2nd year wedding anniversary. We were there with our best friend, Meg. It was so fun. And we had great sunsets, and we were doing some great work in the beginning. And then we made our way over to safari. It was all just amazing.
Yeah, it truly was.
So let's talk about safari. So after our week in the Western villages in Kenya, we made our way back east, kind of east, back towards Nairobi, but we stopped in the Mara, which is where you'll find the national park. Within the national park, you can go on safari. So we did safari for 2 days. We stayed at this amazing camping site, like glamping site, where we stayed in a canopy tent and had a full bathroom, and it was like luxurious living, which was very different from how we spent our first week in Kenya. And we got to see so many animals.
It was insane. And this camp that we were staying at is literally in a conservancy. Is that what they call it? So in the conservancy, which is right outside the gates of where we were staying, there's a million animals. So before even going into the national park, like the first night we were there, our guide Isaac took us around in the conservancy. We saw so many elephants, so many giraffes, Pumbas, and we were...
What's a Pumbaa?
Pumbaa is a warthog. So if you need to get a refresher, watch Lion King because it's so good and depicts it so well. And then that night we were enjoying wine for happy hour out on a table within the conservancy, and it got dark out and we started hearing noises. And Isaac was like, that's the sound of a leopard. So he put his little flashlight on his phone and was like, the leopard won't come if they see the light. So that's a little terrifying. Needless to say, I was not allowed to run while we stayed at safari because I would have definitely gotten trampled or eaten by an animal. Not even going into the national park the first night. We still saw so much.
And our guide Isaac was part of the Maasai tribe, and it's kind of like what you classically think of Kenya. They wear like red capes, they have spears, they have beautiful beatery work that they wear. We got to learn a lot about the Maasai tribe, and then we got to see a lot of the animals, which was just so cool. So there's a big 5 of animals, and those are the leopard, elephant, lion, buffalo, and rhino. And we saw everything but the rhino.
It seems like the rhino is a little mysterious. They haven't seen it in a while, but seeing the leopard was huge. Isaac, our tour guide, kept telling us the leopard is very elusive. And when he heard it was out the one day, he's like, we're driving to find it. And we found it. And wow, she was beautiful. The leopard is like very majestic creature. I was obsessed with her.
She was just like walking along the river. So cool.
She also walked right up to our car and basically brushed the car. I had it on camera and I was like, oh my God, she's right under us. That was so crazy.
And for some reason, the animals, when you're in the car, they just really don't care. The animals who are heavily preyed upon do care because they're always scared of everything. But the lions, the leopards, the bigger animals, they really did not care if you came up to them in the car. Obviously, we weren't walking around them. That would have been way too dangerous. But they were such cool animals to see. We also saw cheetah. We saw cheetah hunt. And I didn't know if we were going to be prepared to see animals eat other animals, and I was a little bit nervous about it, and I was like, I don't know if I want to see it. But when I was out there and you see how hard it is to get food, you are almost rooting for the animal that's hunting because you know that they need to eat, and that's just what they need to do.
We got to see 2 separate cheetah chases. So a mom with 4 cubs was one, and 2 male cheetahs that stay close together. I definitely didn't know if I'd be prepared to see that either, but you're rooting for the cheetahs in those situations because they work so hard for their food, and it's hard all around for sure to see a little Pumbaa die, but it's also pretty cool.
Yeah, poor Pumbas, poor warthogs are at the bottom of the food chain, and they are so cute.
Yeah.
Elephants is my favorite animal by far. However, seeing the warthogs, the Pumbas. They are so cute and they're so ugly. And they're just at the bottom and they get chased around a lot. And we saw a couple get eaten, but they were my favorite animal. The little,
wow.
Yeah, the little piglets were just so sweet. And we learned so much. We learned so much about mating behavior. We learned so much about the animals and their tendencies. It was like National Geographic documentary, but in real life.
For sure.
What was your favorite animal?
Oh, I'm so torn. It's between the leopard and the female lions. I just loved both. I love how the lion prides stick together, and I love seeing the mom interact with the cubs. The leopard was interesting because she was on her own, so I wish I could have seen her interact with other leopards, but it's a toss-up between the leopard and the lions. I was just really amazed by both of them.
And the male lions are pretty lazy, and
Yeah.
the females, of course, are doing everything. They're leading the hunts. They're taking care of the kids.
Yeah, they literally hunt down the food so
Yes.
that the rest of the pride can eat. And I'm like, shocking, no surprise there.
They were awesome. So from there, after safari, we went back to Nairobi, which is where we flew into, and had a couple days in the city to end out our trip. We had a great dinner. We had 2 great dinners with our friend Meg's friends who lived there. And it was just like a perfect ending to the trip of just connecting with people, reflecting on an amazing 2 weeks and getting that time in the city. And the city was so completely different from the villages. It felt like a bustling, normal city that you see anywhere, minus the insane driving.
Oh my gosh.
But New York City driving is crazy as well. But in New York City, they do adhere to stoplights. And in Nairobi, there are limited stoplights. Most of it is roundabouts, and people just fly through.
None of it makes sense.
None.
Terrifying.
We had to drive from the Mara, from Safari to Nairobi, and it was the scariest drive I've ever been in my entire life.
I thought I was going to die.
What was your favorite part of the trip?
It's very hard to choose a favorite. I loved our morning runs and watching the little kids walk to school and just seeing people on their day to day. I loved all the people we met. But I have to say my favorite day was our unexpected extra day in Kisumu.
Yep.
We just laughed so hard that day. Kisumu's on Lake Victoria. It's not on a coast, but this lake is massive. So they have a lot of beach bars. And we went to several beach bars that day. Meg accidentally ripped her pants and literally had a whole like right in the middle of on the seam of her butt. So we just stopped at a tailor that's working in this hut. Meg shows her pants. She takes them off. The girl just sewed them right up, and we were back on our way.
Yes.
And there were just so many funny things that happened that day, and just getting that unexpected extra day to explore was probably my favorite day.
Yeah, for sure.
How about you?
Yeah, mine was also in Western Kenya when we were in the village, not in the city of Kisumu, but we were in the village at that time. And Meg has a friend who's also a tailor, and he invited us to come over and see his family. We made mandazi, which is like a fried dough ball, but doesn't have as much sugar as I would put on it. I would definitely put powdered sugar on it if it
It's
were
like
up
a
to me.
zeppoli without powdered
Yes,
sugar.
it's still delicious. And we made it with his family and got to meet his entire family. He also made us, we picked out fabric and we gave him a pair of our pants that we like. And he made us each a pair of pants that are just so
I'm
cool.
obsessed.
Spending time with him and his family, getting to meet his kids, getting to meet his wife, getting to do that with them was definitely a highlight of my trip.
Yeah, that was a really cool day. I agree. I love that as well.
So want to mention one more time, hockeyhealthkenya.org. It's HAKI health. And you can donate. You could donate $5 if you'd like. You could just learn more about them. You can share about them on Instagram. I know that we will be doing that as well. The money goes such a long way to helping people who know exactly what they need, but just need a little bit more resources to get there. The other thing that I want to mention is we are always on the lookout for women's sports, and there was a lack of women's sports within Kenya, especially in the villages.
Yes, absolutely. There were a few times where Meg was hyping me up saying Danielle runs marathons and telling her friends that. And of course, everyone talks about Kipchoge, who is an amazing male runner. Most people know who he is if you're into running, from Kenya, and grew up in Kenya, trains in Kenya. And one of the things we'll talk about today, and one of the things I was advocating for, I was like, yeah, you also have great female runners in Kenya who are incredible marathoners. One of the highlights we'll talk about today was about Ruth Chepingetich, who broke the world record while we were on the trip, and I was hyping her up to everyone. I was like, yeah, well, do you know Ruth Chepingetich? Some people did or acted like they did, but I'm like, your women runners are just as incredible. In the Villages, definitely not many girls, if any, did we see playing sports, and hopefully over the years, clearly the Villages are a lot behind where we are, so hopefully women's sports is one of the things that will catch up with everything else, because obviously we're passionate about that.
For sure. So what did we miss while we were away? Did we miss anything?
Too much.
I don't think we missed much.
Okay.
So we're going to do a few quick takeaways from what we missed in the past couple of weeks. The Orlando Pride, NWSL, are no longer unbeaten. They had their first loss to the Portland Thorns, and then they lost to Gotham Craziness.
That is crazy. The second thing, which I just mentioned, Kenya's Ruth Chepingetich broke the world record at the Chicago Marathon. Chicago Marathon is notoriously a very flat course, and a lot of people break world records. Kelvin Kiptum, who unfortunately passed away last year, he broke the record for the men's. He's also from Kenya. So 2 years in a row, Kenyan runners on both the men's and the women's side broke the world record at this marathon. She finished in 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 56 seconds. She's the first woman to ever finish a marathon in less than 2 hours and 10 minutes, beating the previous world record by almost 2 full minutes. Just incredible. So cool for her.
And it was thought that it couldn't be done. You know how it takes so long where it's like, oh, can the women get under 2:10? And now that it's done, it's like, I bet we're going to see a lot more people do it now that people know it's possible.
Who doesn't love to see a world record broken?
For sure. Another thing that happened, a bunch of WNBA head coaches were fired. We knew about some of them already, but even more came through in the past couple weeks. So Kurt Miller from the Los Angeles Sparks, fired. Tanisha Wright from the Atlanta Dream, gone. Teresa Weatherspoon from the Chicago Sky, fired. Latricia Trammell from the Dallas Wings, fired. Eric Tebow from the Washington Mystics, fired. So there's going to be a whole new coaching staff happening in the WNBA next year.
Yes. Also, WNBPA, which is the Women's National Basketball Players Association, opted out of their CBA and heads to the negotiating table. This will push for revenue sharing, retirement, pregnancy, and family planning benefits.
Yeah, and we talked about this in a previous episode about the historic CBA that was signed in 2020 for the WNBA. And it's no surprise that the WNBPA, the Players Association, is opting out of the CBA after this historic season. They deserve to get revenue sharing. They deserve everything that they ask for. And obviously there's going to be pushback from the WNBA, but excited to see what could happen here. This goes through until next November. So this is going to be a long road now from this opt-out, but no surprise to see them opting out to create some better working conditions and some more money for the players. We also missed the WNBA finals. We were so sad to miss it. They were playing at 3 a.m. Kenya time. This past weekend, we actually watched Game 5. We were watching highlights all throughout, but wanted to just spend a little bit of time because we missed it so much talking about the WNBA finals. So let's get into it.
When we left for Kenya, it was Game 1 and we were in the airport waiting to board our flight with it on our phones, like, oh my God. And then of course we had to get on our flight and miss the ending of the game and saw it when we landed. When we got home this past weekend, we were like, we need to watch the replay of Game 5. I think it would have been a big commitment to watch all 5 games. So we were like, let's at least watch Game 5 so we can really get a taste of what happened, because the highlights never do it justice.
Yes. So this WNBA finals, the series featured comeback wins, insane individual performances from both sides, and multiple overtime games, and it came down to Game 5. The New York Liberty beat the Minnesota Lynx 67-62 in overtime.
Which means my prediction was wrong, even though I still think Minnesota should have won that game, and we'll talk more about that and the reason why, but they didn't.
This is the New York Liberty's first franchise title ever. This was their 6th time in the finals, and they finally did it.
That's a rough go 5 finals without winning, and then your 6, you barely pull it off.
Barely. You're one good call away from losing that game.
Seriously. And some of their top players did not perform particularly high.
Minnesota really dominated the first half. When we were watching, we knew the ending and we were like, we cannot believe that the Liberty are somehow going to win this because Minnesota just looks so dominant. But Minnesota came out a little bit flatter, a little bit more on edge the second half.
In the third quarter, yeah. But the first half, it was totally in their hands. It took a few minutes for the Liberty to even score a single basket. Yeah. And if I was watching that game live and I kept saying it on the replay, I would have said Minnesota has this game in the bag. It's crazy.
Like you mentioned, New York's top scorers did not put on a great show. Sabrina Ionescu, she struggled. She went 1 from 19 from the field. She didn't score until the fourth quarter.
Brutal. I think you looked this up online. It was like the first time since 1980 since someone went 1 for 19.
Yeah, I don't remember what the stat was, or that was on Reddit, so I don't know. You take that stat with a grain of salt.
Okay, don't quote us on that, but whatever it was brutal, and I don't wish that upon anyone.
No. And the 3-pointer was really not working for either team.
No.
Minnesota had some really good looks towards the end of overtime that could have evened up the game, put them ahead, and they just weren't falling. And for New York, they were 2 from 23 from the 3-point line. They were shooting 8.3%. Yikes.
That is brutal.
So let's talk about the reffing, because we heard about it. We saw it on social media. We watched the game this past weekend. And I think overall, this entire season, the reffing has been questionable, and the reffing continued to be questionable, especially in this game 5.
What else is new? I feel like we're always bashing refs, but I feel like you get paid way too much to be that bad at your job.
I feel like they deserve it. So let's talk about the end of the game. So it's the end of regular time in the fourth quarter, and Alana Smith from the Minnesota Lynx gets called for a foul on Breanna Stewart with 3.9 seconds left in the game. At this point, Minnesota is up 60-58.
Breanna Stewart had just missed 2 foul shots in a row, yes, the previous possession, and the quote-unquote foul that they called. You were also questioning, did Stewie travel? It was just like nothing about that play should have gone in New York's favor.
Did not look like a foul to me.
Absolutely not. She had all ball and barely even touched the ball.
But the thing was, they challenged it. Minnesota Lynx challenged it.
And somehow the refs did not overturn it.
If you want to cry conspiracy theory, I would be like, it never comes down to one play. And that was a bad call.
And Kathy was wearing a New York City dress.
Yeah, that was also not right.
A little suspect.
You know, we love to talk about Kathy, but sometimes she just makes decisions or says things where I'm like, oh my gosh, you just need to talk to one PR person, just one, before you put on some clothes or before you go out there and talk to someone.
And if you're wondering who Kathy is, Kathy Engelbert is the commissioner of the league. So that's who we're talking about.
We feel like we can call her by her first name because we've hung out with her.
And Carolyn gave her a big hug.
The foul occurs, the non-foul foul occurs, and Breanna Stewart, although she missed the 2 free throws before, she hits both to force overtime.
To tie the game. That wasn't the end of the fourth quarter regulation. The Lynx did have a good look at the basket. Yeah. Kayla McBride had a nice 3-point attempt and unfortunately just could not make it. So yes, then it went into overtime.
And then within overtime, the Minnesota Lynx had 6 overtime turnovers. It was a really ugly game for both teams. They went into overtime 60-60, and the final was only 67-62.
The Lynx just looked deflated going into overtime, especially Kayla McBride. I feel like after she missed that 3, she was a little disappointed. And multiple Lynx players had so many fouls. Like Nafisa Collier ended up fouling out in overtime. Minnesota Lynx only scored 2 foul shots in overtime. That's terrible.
It was not good. Nafisa Collier, who fouled out, did have 22 points with 7 rebounds. Kayla McBride finished with 21 points for the Minnesota Lynx. But the bench for New York Liberty stepped up and Niara Sabali had 13 points off the bench. Leonie Fibich, who didn't come off the bench, but just played really well as well. And they pulled out the win. And then Jonquel Jones had 17 points and earned herself MVP of the finals, which is just great. And she was so surprised and so happy.
She had a great championship series
For
overall.
sure.
It was really cool to see her reaction when they called out her name for MVP.
Jonquel Jones has come such a long way. She was most improved player in 2017, sixth woman of the year in 2018, regular season MVP in 2021, is a 5-time All-Star. She has just been putting in the work, showing up, doing what she needs to do, and it's finally paid off. She's a WNBA champion and finals MVP.
Yeah. Good. Great for her. And the whole team was just super excited to bring home a championship for the first time in franchise history. The New York Liberty's owners seem like really cool people.
Oh, they are. Again, we've talked about in previous episodes the New York Liberty and what a great example they are of investing in a team and seeing the turnaround. When they were under their previous owners who were actively trying to make them look horrible, they moved them to Westchester. They were playing in front of 2,000 fans. The size come in and they completely turn it around. They bring them to Barclays Center. They start investing. They are giving them chartered flights and getting fined for giving them charter flights because they thought that it was important. You see what happens when there's a solid investment.
Yep.
This was New York's first basketball championship in 51 years.
Between MNBA and WNBA.
Exactly. Because the Knicks and Nets are so stinky that they cannot figure out a way to win a championship. The New York Liberty come home and they make it happen. On top of that, the WNBA finals game was the most watched finals game in 25 years. It averaged 2.2 million viewers and was a 142% increase from last year's finals clinching game. Just overall an amazing WNBA season.
I truly believe it's only going to get better year over year, and really excited to continue to see the future of the WNBA. It's just an exciting time to be a women's sports fan.
For sure. So let's get into what we're looking forward to this week. I will start. College basketball is back.
I am so friggin' excited.
So next Monday, November 4th, college basketball begins. The AP poll was released. The top 5 are South Carolina in the number 1 spot, UConn in the number 2 spot, USC at number 3, Texas at number 4, and UCLA at number 5. Do you agree?
Yeah, these teams are stacked. They're going to be scary to watch, and it's going to be really exciting. I wonder how LSU feels about this.
And Notre Dame also a little bit lower. I'm always curious. Do you want to make a way too early Final Four?
Sure. I think it's going to be South Carolina, UConn, USC, and I'm throwing Notre Dame in the mix.
We are on such the same page. I was going to say the exact same thing. I wish I could disagree with you, but that's also what I think.
Look at you turning into a little Notre Dame fan finally after all these years.
You know, if you just stick around long enough and you get to know the players long enough and you have a wife that continues to just continue watching, it happens.
Yeah, it does. I'm proud.
So number 1, South Carolina takes on Michigan at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time in Las Vegas on TNT on Monday, November 4th.
Should we go to Vegas?
I mean, I'm not going to say no. You know, after all the money we just spent traveling halfway around the world, what's one more airline trip? What are you looking forward to?
Number 5, UCLA plays number 17 Louisville at 2:30 p.m. Eastern in Paris, France on ESPN2.
Same day. So do you think, is there a way that we could do both? Could we fly to Paris and then make our way back to Vegas all in one day?
Oui.
Okay. Really showing off your French. Do you want to try that in Kiswahili? I don't know what it is either.
I forget what yes is.
I have no idea. Meg, I know you're listening. Let us know what yes is in Kiswahili.
Yeah, text us when you hear this. That's it for this week. We will see you next week on Women's Sports Weekly. In the meantime, watch women's sports. Rate and subscribe to the pod on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Share the podcast with your friends. Keep sending us topics you want us to cover on Instagram at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. And thanks for joining us.
We're so happy to be back.
See you soon.